Hi everyone, I'm Jackie from Bloom Property Management, and I want to talk about why I've started insulating walls on properties that don't currently have insulation. And I know if you're thinking, well, all new houses have insulation in their walls, what are you talking about? Actually, there's a significant portion of our housing stock that is pre-1980 and so does not have wall insulation as standard. It was very, very unusual for houses prior to 1980 to have wall insulation fitted, and you might think, well, New Zealand's got a temperate climate, that's okay. It's not that temperate. It certainly is cold in houses without wall insulation, or in summer it can be unbearably hot, especially if the outside is painted dark, but that's the topic of another talk. So I've found a company that can inject insulation into the wall, and it's not expanding foam, it's a loose fibre fill, and it fills up the cavity of the wall and is nice and thickly compressed, so there's no slumping of that product over time because there's nowhere for it to slump. It fills up the wall solidly. It's water repellent, so that we don't have to worry about if the building paper isn't fully intact, as is often the case with properties that are older. We don't have to worry about that tracking water into the framing and so on. Now, that's the technical stuff. They can put in tiny little holes. They may be this big, the holes they drill, and they drill them between every stud and noggin, and it gets pumped in there with air, and afterwards they seal the hole. Now, depending on whether it's from the exterior or interior, if it's from the interior, then it's obviously just plaster, and you come along after and sand it off, put a new coat of plaster over the top, finish it off, undercoat, paint, and you're good. From the exterior, they use a slightly different filler to fill it, and they guarantee that so long as you've got paint on that wall that's in good condition, you won't have any leaks from the exterior. So that's the technical aspects of the application, but the reason why I'm using it is that it makes a huge difference to how the properties feel inside. So we've noticed from properties, as we were going through this process and installing it in our own properties, we were finding that the ones that had been insulated instantly felt really quiet inside. So it made a huge difference to how much road noise and how much neighbourhood chatter and all those kind of external sounds had on the property. Now, I'm a person who's quite sensitive to sounds. I don't have to wear ear protection when I go out in public or anything, but I don't like noisy environments. And for me, I really valued that quietness. Now, I think, unless someone's a really large extrovert, and really likes that vibrancy all the time, I think everyone would benefit from having a quieter environment just for their mental well-being and their sense of peace and calm. So if we can give that to our tenants, then hopefully they have happier, healthier lives from that point of view, that they're just a little less impacted by the world going on around them all the time. So that's a benefit that is not the primary reason of insulation, but certainly was one thing I noticed instantly. Other things I noticed straight away in our properties that were insulated was that they felt quite warm, or constant, I should say, because we went and saw these properties in winter as well as summer, and the temperature range was always within that healthy range, even on properties where we'd had the insulation done and then we had a big renovation happening at the property, so no one was living in the house. It was in the middle of winter. The builders were coming and going all the time, leaving the front door open for easy access out to where they were cutting up timber and so on. And there was no heating in the house. And even with that going on and the temperature being in single digits, it still felt pretty comfortable. Now, I'm not saying I wasn't wearing a jersey. I was, and there was a couple of days where I'm like, I think I'm going to put on the heat because it was a little nippy. But it was very quickly resolved by closing the front door and putting on the heat for a short amount of time until we're all comfortable again to keep painting and do the other things we're doing. And it was warm enough for the paint to dry, which is really important. Paint doesn't dry well under a certain temperature range, and the insulation certainly helped keep the house comfortably within paint drying temperature. So that level of comfort that we experienced from a house that was unheated, unoccupied, and had a door left open all the time, that's easy to see how that correlates to properties that are occupied with a bit of heating and the warmth of bodies in there and just people doing their daily lives really adds to the ambient temperature of a place. For our property, other than the power tools the tradies were using, there wasn't any ambient heat from cooking or using computers or other big appliances like that in the household. And certainly we notice, my husband's a geek, he has a very big computer setup. It drives me mad about how much energy it uses, but it's his job and it makes him happy, so we all have to make compromises. But we certainly notice that the room that he has his computer gear set up in is always a very toasty room. So these kind of things do actually impact on the warmth of a home. So getting back to the insulation thing, that would certainly contribute in some way to the passive heating of a house. And certainly in summer, or in spring and autumn when you need it most, any sunshine coming into that house is going to be more likely to stay in that house and keep it warm. If people open the curtains during the day and close them at night, that certainly helps. Probably the most important thing I found, hang on before I get to that, in summer also we noticed it's become unbearably hot in summer where we live, and it kind of takes everyone by surprise because we're not used to having a really hot summer. And given that 2023 was the hottest year on record and the last 50 years have been increasing more and more so every year, we're going to see a lot more really hot summers going forward. Visiting our rental properties that have been insulated during summer, we found that the heat was much less and that tenants were able to keep comfortable just by having a fan circulating air around the house, opening a window to let out the hottest of the air and letting cool air in at the bottom really worked quite effectively. They didn't have to use the heat pump as much as they would have otherwise to stay comfortable. So that was a huge impact. Right, now the most important thing. I have a tenant who has 3 young children, and I didn't know it at the time, but she was always, every single week, taking one of those 3 kids to the A&E department for some sort of respiratory illness. So they had coughs, they had colds, they had asthma, any of those sort of bronchial issues seemed to be a constant rotation. Since we insulated her house, which we're able to do with her in the property because it's not that disruptive, she just noticed it suddenly stopped. Right? Since we insulated her property, she's not taking the kids to A&E for any of those issues, and it's been 18 months now at least since we did that. So I was horrified that that had been happening, and I was totally unaware of it. And she thought it was normal because where she lives, it's really common for houses to not be insulated, and so everyone she knew was in the same sort of situation, right? So on some ways I shouldn't feel that bad because that's just the quality of housing it was, but I am still shocked and appalled that that is how a lot of people live. Right? That shouldn't be the case. We should definitely insulate properties so that people can have healthier lives. And so I'm really glad that we've been able to do that for her and for a number of other people as well. But yeah, still quite shocking that happens. Now, if you think about the societal benefits of this, it's not just her family that has benefited from this. That has meant one less A&E admission or A&E time spent every week. Now, if we did that in the whole community, that's potentially 30,000 families that are not going to A&E. So how much more health resource would we have available for treating other conditions and other issues that are going on? Because we're just not dealing with that bronchial load. So there's a lot of benefit to a society if we put in more insulation in our properties. So I'll leave you with that thought to contemplate about the value of putting in insulation into walls. If you've not got insulated walls currently, it does make a huge difference to people's lives. And I should also say her heating bill went down significantly. So one of our tenants that we did this for, a different family, she said that it took $100 off her power bill every month by the work we'd done to insulate the walls. We had put in LED lights, we'd turned down a hot water cylinder, the flow rate as well as the temperature because that had been set too high, and just draft stopping, which is required for healthy homes requirements, and all of these things. Her family was so much more comfortable and they saved $100 a month. Amazing. So I'll leave you with those thoughts. Happy insulating your properties. I'm Jackie from Bloom Property Management, and follow me for more tips on ways you can make your properties more sustainable and healthier and better for you as an investor too.